There's just no room for you, Georgia. You understand, right? My mother's voice was light, almost cheerful, as if she were telling me about the weather rather than excluding me from yet another family vacation. I stood in my kitchen in Denver, phone pressed to my ear, feeling that familiar tightness spread across my chest. The house in Hawaii only has 4 bedrooms, she continued. Your father and I need one, obviously. Then there's your sister and Brian, and the kids each need their own space now that they're getting older. You know how Mackenzie gets when she has to share with her brother. My name is Georgia, and I am 27 years old. I work as a regional sales director for a medical equipment distribution company, a position I fought tooth and nail to earn over the past 5 years. I live alone in a modest apartment. I pay my own bills. And until that moment, I had still harbored some foolish hope that my family saw me as more than an afterthought. What about the couch? I heard myself ask, hating the desperation that crept into my voice. Or I could get a hotel nearby and just meet up with everyone during the day. My mother sighed, that long-suffering sound she had perfected over the years. Honey, that would just be awkward. Besides, the whole point is family bonding time. If you're staying somewhere else, it defeats the purpose. I wanted to scream that excluding me entirely defeated the purpose even more. But I had learned long ago that arguing with my mother was like trying to hold water in my hands. Everything I said simply slipped through her fingers, unacknowledged and unremembered. We're also doing Lake Tahoe in February, she added, as if offering me a consolation prize. Maybe by then we can figure something out. How many bedrooms does that house have? A pause. 5, but your sister invited her in-laws this time. You know how close she is with Brian's parents. They're practically family. Practically family. Unlike me, her actual daughter. Right, I said, my voice flat. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful time. Oh, we will. I'll send you pictures. And Georgia, maybe you should start saving up for your own vacation. You work so hard. You deserve a nice getaway. After she hung up, I stood motionless in my kitchen for what felt like an hour. The evening light was fading through my window, casting long shadows across the countertops. I thought about calling her back, about demanding to know why my sister Vivian and her family always came first, why there was always room for everyone except me. But I already knew the answer, even if no one in my family would ever say it out loud. Vivian was the golden child. She had given my parents grandchildren. She had married a successful orthodontist and lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs. She hosted holiday dinners and remembered everyone's birthdays and did all the things a good daughter was supposed to do. I, on the other hand, had committed the unforgivable sin of being single, childless, and focused on my career. I walked to my refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of wine, pouring myself a generous glass. As I took the first sip, I noticed the notification on my phone. An email from my company's human resources department. I opened it without much thought, expecting some routine update about benefits or policy changes. Instead, my eyes widened as I read the subject line, Year-End Performance Bonus Distribution. My heart began to pound as I scrolled down. I had known bonuses were coming, but I had expected maybe $10,000 or $15,000 based on my sales numbers. I had exceeded my targets by a significant margin this year, but the economy had been unpredictable, and I had tempered my expectations accordingly. The number at the bottom of the email made me sit down. $55,000. I read it 3 times to make sure I was not hallucinating. $55,000 to be deposited directly into my account within 2 weeks. My hands were shaking as I set down my wine glass. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought about calling my mother back. I thought about telling her I could contribute to the Hawaii house rental, that I could pay for a bigger place so there would be room for everyone. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I felt something shift inside me. A door that had been slowly closing for years finally clicked shut. They did not want me there. No amount of money would change that. I picked up my phone again, But this time I called someone else entirely. Someone who had never once made me feel like an inconvenience. "Hey, stranger," Danielle answered on the second ring. "I was just thinking about you." Danielle had been my best friend since college, and over the past decade, she had become more family to me than my blood relatives ever were. She and her husband Cole had welcomed me into their lives without hesitation, and their 5-year-old daughter Rosie called me Auntie Georgia with such genuine affection that it sometimes brought tears to my eyes. "Are you busy right now?" I asked. "I need to talk to you about something." "Cole's putting Rosie to bed. Give me 20 minutes and I can video chat. Everything okay?" I looked at my phone, at the email still glowing on the screen, and felt a smile spread slowly across my face. "Actually," I said, "I think everything is about to be great." Growing up as Vivian's younger sister meant growing up in her shadow. She was 3 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, she was always the standard against which I was measured and found lacking. Vivian had been a cheerleader and homecoming queen. I preferred books and solitary walks. Vivian had a parade of boyfriends and an active social calendar. I had a small circle of close friends and spent my weekends studying. My parents never explicitly said they wished I were more like her, but they did not need to. Their disappointment was woven into every interaction, every comparison, every sigh of resignation when I failed to meet expectations I had never agreed to in the first place. The vacation exclusions had started years ago, so gradually that I almost did not notice at first. When I was in college, my parents took Vivian to Europe for her graduation present. When I graduated 2 years later, they gave me a check for $500 and suggested I use it toward my student loans. When Vivian got engaged, the entire family flew to Napa Valley for a weekend celebration. When I got my first major promotion, my mother sent a text that simply said, "Good for you, honey." But the real pattern emerged after Vivian had children. Suddenly, every family event revolved around Mackenzie and Tyler. Every holiday was scheduled around their school calendar. Every vacation destination was chosen based on what would be fun for kids ages 8 and 11. And somehow, in this new family configuration, there was increasingly less room for me. 3 years ago, my parents rented a beach house in Florida for Thanksgiving. I drove 12 hours to get there, only to discover upon arrival that the only sleeping space left for me was an air mattress in the laundry room. Vivian and Brian had the master suite. My parents had the second bedroom. The kids had the third, and somehow Vivian's best friend from high school and her husband had been given the fourth bedroom because they happened to be in town. "We didn't think you'd mind," my mother had said when I expressed my surprise. "You're so easygoing about these things." I was not easygoing. I had simply learned that complaining made no difference, so I had stopped bothering. I slept in the laundry room that Thanksgiving, listening to the dryer tumble someone's beach towels at 6 in the morning, and told myself it would be different next time. It was not different. 2 years ago, the family reunion was held at a lodge in Tennessee. I had confirmed my attendance months in advance, and even sent money to help cover the rental cost. When I arrived, I discovered that my room had been given to Brian's brother, who had decided to come at the last minute. "He's practically family," my mother had explained, using those same words that would echo again in our phone call. "And he came all the way from California. You only drove from Colorado." I spent that reunion sleeping in my car in the parking lot, sneaking into the lodge each morning to shower before anyone else woke up. I told myself I was being mature, that I was keeping the peace, that family was worth these small sacrifices. Last Christmas was perhaps the worst. My parents had announced they were hosting a special holiday gathering at their home, and everyone was expected to attend. I requested time off work, booked an expensive flight during peak holiday travel, and arrived on December 23rd with gifts for everyone. But when I walked through the door, I immediately sensed something was wrong. "Oh, Georgia," my mother had said, her face falling. "Didn't Vivian tell you? We changed the celebration to the 26th because the kids have a ski trip with their other grandparents on Christmas Day." No one had told me. My flight back was scheduled for December 26th at 8 in the morning. I had already missed the window to change it without paying a massive fee. "You can still stay for Christmas Eve dinner," my mother offered, "and maybe a little of Christmas morning before we do our big family gift exchange on the 26th. I spent Christmas Eve watching my niece and nephew open early presents while I sat on the periphery. I spent Christmas morning eating breakfast alone, because everyone else was sleeping in before the kids' ski trip. I flew home on the 26th, while my family gathered for the celebration I had never been properly invited to attend. When I told Danielle about it afterward, she had been furious on my behalf. "Why do you keep going back?" she had demanded. "They treat you like an optional add-on, not a member of the family." "Because they're my parents," I had said weakly. "Because that's what you're supposed to do." "No," Danielle had replied firmly. "What you're supposed to do is surround yourself with people who actually want you there, who make room for you, literally and figuratively. Family isn't just blood, Georgia. Family is the people who show up for you." I had cried then, overwhelmed by the simplicity of her words and the years of pain they acknowledged. Danielle had held me while I sobbed, and afterward, she and Cole had insisted I join them for New Year's Eve. Their celebration was small and warm and full of laughter, and when midnight struck, little Rosie had thrown her arms around me and shouted, "Happy New Year, Auntie Georgia! I love you to the moon!" That was family. That was what it was supposed to feel like. Now, sitting in my kitchen with a $55,000 bonus burning a hole in my bank account and yet another rejection from my parents fresh in my mind, I finally understood what I needed to do. Not out of spite, though I would be lying if I said revenge was not part of my motivation. But more than that, I needed to finally, definitively show myself that I deserved better. That there were people in this world who would never make me sleep in a laundry room or a parking lot, or ask me to simply disappear so others could be more comfortable. I needed to prove that I could create my own family, my own traditions, my own memories that no one could take from me. And I was going to do it in spectacular fashion. The video call with Danielle that evening changed everything. Her face appeared on my screen, warm and curious, her dark hair pulled back in the messy bun she always wore after work. "Okay, spill," she said. "You sounded weird on the phone. Good weird, but weird." I took a deep breath and told her everything. The Hawaii exclusion, the Lake Tahoe exclusion, the flimsy excuses about room and space and family bonding that somehow never seemed to include me. And then I told her about the bonus. Danielle's eyes went wide. $55,000? Georgia, that's incredible. "I keep checking to make sure the email is real," I admitted. "But here's the thing. My first instinct was to offer to help pay for a bigger house so my family could include me. And then I realized how pathetic that sounded. How pathetic it would be to literally pay for the privilege of being treated like an afterthought." "You're not pathetic," Danielle said firmly. "You've just been conditioned to accept crumbs when you deserve the whole damn bakery." I laughed despite myself. That's a very Danielle way to put it. "Well, it's true." She leaned closer to the camera. "So what are you going to do instead?" This was the moment I had been building toward, the idea that had crystallized in my mind while I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at that email. "I want to take a trip," I said. "A real trip. Not a budget weekend getaway or a mediocre package deal. I want to go somewhere spectacular, somewhere I've always dreamed of visiting, and I want to take people who actually want to spend time with me." Danielle's expression softened. "Georgia, I want to take you and Cole and Rosie," I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. "I want to rent one of those overwater bungalows in Bora Bora that I've been looking at on Instagram for years. I want to swim in crystal clear water and watch the sunset over the lagoon and drink champagne and actually feel like I belong somewhere." For a long moment, Danielle said nothing. Then she wiped at her eyes, and I realized she was crying. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "That would cost. I know what it would cost." I've already looked at options. My bonus can cover the entire trip with money left over. Transportation, accommodations, meals, everything. I want to do this. No, I need to do this. For myself. Georgia, we can't let you pay for... You're not letting me do anything. I'm asking you. Please. You and Cole and Rosie are my family. Not by blood, but by choice. You're the people who showed up for me when my actual family couldn't be bothered. You're the people who made room for me, every single time, without me having to beg or pay or apologize for existing. Danielle was fully crying now, and through the phone speaker, I could hear Cole's voice in the background asking what was wrong. Just come here, Danielle said to him, her voice thick. You need to hear this. Cole appeared on screen, his brow furrowed with concern, until Danielle quickly explained what I had proposed. His expression cycled through surprise, disbelief, and finally, something that looked like deep affection. Georgia, he said slowly. Are you sure about this? That's an enormous amount of money. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The three of us talked for another hour, working through logistics and dates and the practical considerations of traveling with a 5-year-old. Danielle kept trying to insist that they pay for at least some portion of the trip, but I held firm. This was my gift to them. My thank you for years of unconditional love and support. More than that, it was my gift to myself. Proof that I could choose my own path and create my own happiness. By the end of the call, we had tentatively settled on dates that coincided with my parents' Hawaii trip. This was not an accident. If I was going to make a statement, I wanted it to be impossible to ignore. That night, I stayed up until nearly 2 a.m, researching accommodations and reading reviews. I found a resort that offered overwater villas with glass floors so you could watch the fish swim beneath you. The photos showed private decks with direct lagoon access, outdoor showers surrounded by tropical flowers, and dinners served by candlelight on the beach. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and for the first time in my life, I was going to experience it. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, dreaming of turquoise water and the sound of gentle waves. In my dream, Rosie was splashing in the lagoon while Danielle and Cole lounged on the deck, and somewhere far away, my parents were realizing that there was no room for me because I had stopped trying to squeeze myself into spaces where I did not fit. I was done being an afterthought. I was ready to be the main character in my own story. The weeks between booking the trip and actually leaving were filled with a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I had expected to feel purely excited, but instead, I found myself checking my phone constantly, half expecting my mother to call with some crisis that would force me to cancel my plans. Old habits, I realized, were remarkably hard to break. The conversation with my mother about their Hawaii trip continued to replay in my mind. She had texted me twice since then, both times to share logistical details about their vacation, as if I would find them interesting rather than painful. The house has the most amazing view of the ocean, her first text read. Your father is already planning which restaurants we should try. Vivian found a great luau that the kids will love. The second text was a photo of the rental house listing. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an infinity pool overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I studied the photo for longer than I should have, counting the beds, imagining where everyone would sleep. There was a pull-out couch in the living room that no one had mentioned. There was a deck with outdoor seating that could have accommodated an air mattress. If they had truly wanted me there, solutions existed. But the truth was as clear as the Hawaiian water in that listing photo. They did not want me there. The excuses about space were just that, excuses. My absence was not a logistical problem to be solved, but a desired outcome. I did not respond to either text. Meanwhile, my preparations for Bora continued. The resort required a deposit to hold the villa, and I transferred the money without hesitation. I researched activities appropriate for young children and discovered that Rosie would be able to participate in a kids' snorkeling program designed specifically for beginners. I found a local vendor who arranged private sunset cruises and another who offered photography sessions for families wanting to capture their vacation memories. Danielle and I spoke nearly every day, her excitement building alongside mine. Cole had taken on the responsibility of packing for Rosie, which led to hilarious daily updates about the negotiations happening in their household. She insists on bringing 7 stuffed animals, Danielle reported during one call. Cole tried to limit her to 2, and she had a full meltdown about abandonment trauma. Where does a 5-year-old even learn about abandonment trauma? Probably from the same place she learned to negotiate like a tiny lawyer, I laughed. She gets that from you, by the way. The negotiating. Cole blames your influence entirely. These conversations were a balm for my soul, a reminder of why I was doing this. Every laugh, every silly story about Rosie's antics, every moment of easy connection reinforced my decision. This was what family was supposed to feel like. This was where I belonged. 3 days before we were scheduled to leave, my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately. My father almost never called me directly, preferring to let my mother handle family communications. His name on my screen sent a spike of adrenaline through my body. "Dad?" I answered cautiously. "Georgia, your mother tells me you haven't responded to her texts about our trip." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "I've been busy with work." "Too busy to send a simple reply?" "She's worried about you." The irony of this statement almost made me laugh. My mother was worried about me, but not worried enough to make room for me on either of 2 separate family vacations. "I appreciate the concern," I said carefully, "but I'm fine. Actually, I have some exciting news of my own." "Oh?" "I'm going on vacation too. Same week as your Hawaii trip, actually." A pause. "Really? Where are you going?" Bora. I booked an overwater villa at a resort there. My friends Danielle and Cole are coming with me, along with their daughter. The silence on the other end stretched so long that I checked to make sure the call had not dropped. Bora, my father finally repeated. "That sounds expensive." "It is, but I received a substantial bonus at work, and I decided to treat myself." "By yourself? With just your friends?" "Yes, Dad. By myself. With people who actually want to spend time with me." I had not intended for the words to come out so pointed, but they hung in the air between us like a challenge. My father, to his credit, seemed to understand that something significant was happening. "Georgia," he said slowly, "if this is about the Hawaii house, you know we would have included you if there was room." "Would you?" Because there was also no room in Lake Tahoe, and there was no room in Tennessee 2 years ago. And there was barely room in Florida 3 years ago, and when there was room, it was a laundry room floor. I'm not calling to argue, Dad. I'm calling to tell you that I've made other plans. Good plans. Plans that don't require me to beg for scraps of attention or sleep in my car so someone else can have my bed." "You slept in your car?" The genuine confusion in his voice told me everything I needed to know. He had not even noticed. Neither had my mother, apparently. Or they had noticed and simply chosen not to care. At the Tennessee reunion, my room was given to someone else after I had already paid for it. I slept in the parking lot for 3 nights rather than make a scene. "Georgia, I had no idea. Why didn't you say something?" "Would it have changed anything if I had?" He did not answer, and in his silence, I found my own answer. "Have a wonderful time in Hawaii," I said. "Give my love to Vivian and the kids." I hung up before he could respond, and then I turned off my phone entirely. Whatever fallout would come from that conversation, I did not want to deal with it yet. I had packing to finish and a dream vacation to prepare for. The night before our departure, Danielle came over to help me organize my luggage. She arrived with wine and a playlist of tropical music, and we spread everything across my living room floor, like we were planning an expedition to another planet. Sunscreen, check. Bug spray, check. That gorgeous sarong I forced you to buy last month. Check. Danielle moved through my belongings with the efficiency of someone who had traveled with a small child and understood the importance of preparation. Are you nervous? She asked suddenly, looking up from my suitcase. About the flight? Not really. It's long, but... No, I mean about all of it. Your family. The statement you're making. I considered the question seriously. Was I nervous? The emotion I felt was harder to define. It was something like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping would change everything, not knowing exactly how you would feel once you were falling. I'm nervous about what comes after, I admitted. When the vacation is over, and I have to actually deal with the consequences of choosing myself for once. Danielle set down the bikini she had been folding and came to sit beside me on the couch. Can I tell you something? I nodded. The first time Cole's family made me feel like an outsider, he cut off contact with them for 6 months. 6 months. He told them that his wife was his priority, and if they couldn't treat me with basic respect, they didn't get access to his life. I didn't know that. It was before we got married, while we were still engaged. His mother had made some comment about how I wasn't good enough for her son, and Cole just snapped. He told me later that he'd always known his family had issues, but he'd made excuses for them, told himself that's just how they were. But when they hurt someone he loved, he couldn't make those excuses anymore. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. What happened after the 6 months? They apologized, genuinely apologized. His mother and I are never going to be best friends, but she treats me with respect now, because Cole showed her that there would be consequences if she didn't. You think I'm doing the same thing? Danielle took my hand in hers. I think you're finally showing your family that your presence in their life is a privilege, not a guarantee. And I think that terrifies them, whether they admit it or not. We finished packing in comfortable silence after that, the weight of our conversation settling into something that felt almost like peace. When Danielle left that night, she hugged me tighter than usual. Thank you, she whispered, for including us in this, for trusting us with something so important. Thank you for being someone worth choosing, I replied. After she was gone, I sat alone in my apartment, looking at the suitcases lined up by the door. Tomorrow, I would board a plane and fly farther than I had ever traveled. Tomorrow, I would begin a new chapter in a story I was finally writing for myself. I did not know exactly what would happen when I returned, but for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was not afraid to find out. The moment our plane touched down in French Polynesia, I felt something shift inside me. The air was different here, thick with humidity, and the scent of flowers I could not name. Through the small aircraft window, I caught my first glimpse of the water that had haunted my dreams for months, a blue so vivid it almost hurt to look at. Rosie, strapped into the seat beside me, pressed her face against the glass and gasped. Auntie Georgia, the water is pretending to be the sky. Danielle caught my eye from across the aisle and smiled. Welcome to paradise. The journey from the airport to our resort involved a boat transfer that Rosie declared was the best boat ever in the whole world. She spent the entire ride hanging over the edge, supervised closely by Cole, pointing at every fish she spotted beneath the surface. Her joy was infectious, and I found myself laughing more in that 30-minute boat ride than I had in months. When the resort finally came into view, I stopped breathing. The overwater villas stretched out across the lagoon like a necklace of wooden jewels. Each one was positioned to offer complete privacy while providing unobstructed views of the surrounding mountains and water. Our villa, the one I had chosen after hours of research and deliberation, sat at the very end of the pier. Georgia, Danielle breathed. This is... She could not finish the sentence. Neither could I. A resort staff member greeted us at the dock with flower leis and glasses of champagne for the adults and juice for Rosie. They led us down the long wooden pier to our villa, explaining the amenities along the way. Private deck with direct lagoon access, glass floor panels in the living room, outdoor shower, 24-hour room service, personal concierge. The interior was even more stunning than the photos had suggested. Natural wood and white linens created a sense of calm that I felt in my bones. The bed was enormous, draped in mosquito netting that looked like something from a fairy tale. And through the glass floor panels, we could see fish swimming lazily beneath our feet. Rosie immediately lay down on the glass, her face inches from the surface. "They're like my pets now," she announced. "That one is Gerald, and that one is Princess Sparkle." Cole started unpacking, while Danielle and I stepped out onto the deck. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that I had never seen outside of heavily filtered photographs. "I can't believe this is real," I said quietly. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake, that I'm not actually supposed to be here." Danielle turned to look at me, her expression serious despite the beautiful backdrop. "That's exactly how your family has made you feel, isn't it? Like there's been a mistake, like you're not supposed to be included in their happiness." I could not respond past the lump in my throat. "Look around you, Georgia. You did this, you made this happen, and you deserve every single second of it." That first evening set the tone for the rest of the trip. We had dinner delivered to our villa, an elaborate spread of fresh seafood and tropical fruits that Rosie mostly ignored in favor of the breadbasket. We sat on the deck watching the stars emerge, and I felt something I had almost forgotten existed: contentment. Over the following days, we fell into a rhythm that felt both luxurious and oddly domestic. Mornings began with breakfast on the deck, Rosie narrating elaborate stories about the fish she had named. Mid-mornings were for swimming in the lagoon, where Rosie proved to be a fearless little water creature who had to be constantly reminded to stay within arm's reach of an adult. Afternoons were for naps and reading, and the kind of lazy relaxation I had never allowed myself to experience. On our third day, I checked my phone for the first time since arriving. I had intentionally left it in airplane mode, wanting to be fully present in my surroundings. But some morbid curiosity compelled me to reconnect with the outside world, if only briefly. The notifications came flooding in: texts from my mother, missed calls from my father, several messages from my sister Vivian, who rarely contacted me directly. But what caught my attention was a notification from social media. My mother had tagged me in a post. I opened the app and felt my stomach drop. The post was a photo of my entire family, minus me, standing in front of the Hawaii rental house. My parents were in the center, arms around each other. Vivian and her husband Brian flanked them on one side, while my niece and nephew mugged for the camera on the other. Everyone was wearing matching Hawaiian shirts that I had not known about, smiling broadly for whoever had taken the picture. The caption read, "Family vacation time, missing Georgia. But there just wasn't room this year. Next time." The lie was so casual, so effortless, that it took my breath away. Missing me, as if my absence was an unfortunate circumstance rather than a deliberate choice. As if they had tried their best to include me and simply been defeated by logistics. Danielle found me sitting on the edge of the deck, feet dangling in the water, staring at my phone. "What happened?" I showed her the post. Her face went through a remarkable series of expressions, ending on something that looked like cold fury. "They didn't even invite you," she said slowly. "And now they're pretending publicly that they wish you were there? That's a special kind of manipulation." "I think it's called covering your tracks," I replied. "If anyone asks why I'm not in the family photo, she can point to that caption and claim she tried." "What are you going to do?" I considered the question carefully. For years, I would have done nothing. I would have swallowed my hurt and liked the photo and commented something neutral about wishing I could have been there. I would have maintained the fiction that my family loved me, even when their actions proved otherwise. But I was sitting in paradise, surrounded by people who had chosen to be there with me. I was done maintaining fictions. "I'm going to post my own photos," I said. "And I'm going to let them speak for themselves." I spent the rest of that afternoon taking pictures. Not the posed, artificial photos that my family favored, but genuine moments of joy. I captured Rosie playing with the fish through the glass floor panels. I captured Danielle and Cole holding hands on the deck, silhouetted against the sunset. I captured our private dinner on the beach, candles flickering in the warm evening breeze. And I recorded a video. A slow pan that started from inside our villa, moved through the glass doors onto the deck, and then across the lagoon to the mountains in the distance. The water was so clear that you could see the coral beneath the surface. The sky was painted in impossible colors. The only sound was the gentle lapping of waves and Rosie's laughter somewhere in the background. "Are you sure about this?" Danielle asked when I showed her what I had created. "I'm sure. It's going to cause a reaction." "I know. That's partly the point." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then post it. And whatever happens, we're here." I uploaded the video that evening with a simple caption. "When you stop trying to fit into spaces that weren't made for you, you find the places where you truly belong. Grateful for my chosen family." I tagged Danielle and Cole, but I did not tag anyone from my biological family. I did not need to. Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds and the gentle movement of the villa floating on the water. For a few blissful moments, I forgot about the post and the statement I had made. I was just a woman on vacation, watching the early morning light paint patterns on the lagoon. Then Danielle knocked on my door. "You need to see this," she said, her voice carefully neutral. My phone had exploded overnight. The video had been shared dozens of times. Comments ranged from supportive strangers who seemed to understand exactly what I was communicating, to confused acquaintances asking about my trip, to messages from family members that grew increasingly frantic. The first text from my mother had come at 6 a.m. her time, which meant she had been awake for hours. "Why didn't you tell us you were going to Bora? We could have coordinated trips, maybe even combined celebrations." The second text was more pointed. "I wish you'd told me you could afford something like this. We would have included you in Hawaii if we'd known money wasn't an issue." The third text dropped all pretense of casual concern. "Your father and I are very hurt that you posted this. It looks like you're trying to make us feel bad for not including you on our trip. That wasn't necessary, Georgia." There were also messages from Vivian, which was unusual enough to make me pause. "Mom is upset. Can you call her and apologize? I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this." And then, from my father, "We need to talk. This isn't the way to handle family disagreements." I read through all of them without responding. Danielle watched me carefully, ready to intervene if I showed signs of crumbling. But I did not feel like crumbling. I felt something entirely different. Something that took me a moment to identify. I felt free. "They want me to apologize," I said finally, "for posting pictures of my vacation." "Of course they do. You just demonstrated that you don't need them, and that terrifies them. My mother says they would have included me if they'd known money wasn't an issue." Danielle's eyebrows rose. "So she's admitting that the excuse about room was a lie?" I had not caught that implication, but she was right. If the issue was truly about physical space in the rental house, my financial situation would be irrelevant. But if the real issue was something else entirely, something my mother did not want to name directly, then my apparent wealth changed the equation. She wants me to be grateful, I realized slowly. She wants me to be poor and struggling and dependent on whatever scraps of attention they're willing to throw my way. When I show up somewhere beautiful and expensive, without them, it disrupts the narrative. What narrative? The one where I'm the family failure, the unmarried, childless, sad little sister who needs their approval to survive. I looked down at my phone, at the dozens of messages demanding my attention and apology. "I'm not responding to any of this," I said. "Not yet. We have 3 more days here, and I'm going to enjoy every single one of them." The remaining days of our trip were magical. I committed fully to being present, which meant my phone stayed in airplane mode except for taking photos. Rosie learned to snorkel in the shallow lagoon, her excitement at seeing a sea turtle up close worth every penny I had spent. Danielle and Cole got a romantic dinner alone while I babysat, and they came back glowing in a way that made my heart swell with happiness for them. On our last night, the resort arranged a private beach dinner for our group. Candles lined the sand, and our table was set beneath a canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch. Rosie fell asleep in her chair before dessert, exhausted from a final afternoon of swimming and playing. "Thank you," Cole said as he lifted his sleeping daughter into his arms. "I know Danielle has probably said it 100 times already, but thank you. This trip has been incredible. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being the family I chose." He nodded, understanding the weight of those words, and carried Rosie back to the villa. Danielle and I stayed behind, finishing our wine and watching the waves lap against the shore. "What are you going to say to them?" she asked. "When you get back?" "I've been thinking about that. Part of me wants to explain everything, to lay out all the times they've hurt me and hope they finally understand. But I've tried that before, and it never works. They just twist my words, or tell me I'm being too sensitive. So what's the alternative? I'm not sure yet, but I think it starts with accepting that I can't make them understand. I can only control my own choices going forward." We sat in silence for a while longer, the ocean breathing its eternal rhythm against the sand. "You're going to be okay," Danielle said finally. "Whatever happens next, you're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her. The journey home was long but surprisingly peaceful. Rosie slept through most of the flights, and I spent the time in contemplative silence, mentally preparing for what waited at the other end. My phone had been off for days, and I knew that turning it back on would be like opening a floodgate. When we finally landed in Denver, I said goodbye to Danielle and Cole at the airport. Rosie, half asleep and cranky from the long travel day, hugged me with all the strength her small arms could manage. "Come back to the fish house with us," she mumbled against my neck. "It was the best." "It was the best," I agreed, "and we'll do it again someday." I watched them walk toward their car, Rosie already asleep against Cole's shoulder, and felt the bittersweetness of returning to real life. At home, I unpacked slowly, deliberately putting off the moment when I would have to face my phone. But eventually there was nothing left to do, and I sat down on my couch with the device in my hands. The notification count was staggering. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, social media mentions. It was like watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. I started with my mother's messages, which had grown increasingly dramatic over the past few days. "I can't believe you're ignoring me, after everything we've done for you. Your sister thinks you've completely lost your mind. So do I. If you want to throw away your family over a vacation, that's your choice. But don't come crying to us when you realize you've made a mistake." And finally, the message that had arrived just hours before my plane landed. "I don't know what I did to deserve this kind of treatment from my own daughter. I tried to raise you right, I really did. But you've always been difficult. I thought you'd grow out of it." I read the message twice, marveling at the complete lack of self-awareness it contained. My mother was positioning herself as the victim, as she always did. Never mind that she had excluded me from 2 family vacations. Never mind that she had spent years treating me as an afterthought. In her mind, my refusal to quietly accept that treatment was the real transgression. I moved on to Vivian's messages, which were less emotional and more transactional. "Mom is driving me crazy about this. Can you please just call her and smooth things over? She's ruining the trip for everyone. Seriously, Georgia, whatever point you're trying to make, You've made it. Now fix it. I don't have time to deal with family drama. I have 2 kids and a husband and a life. Some of us can't just jet off to Bora whenever we feel like it. The irony of that last message, coming from someone who was literally on vacation in Hawaii at that very moment, was not lost on me. Finally, I listened to my father's voicemail. His voice was tired, frustrated, and somehow still condescending. Georgia, this has gone far enough. Your mother is upset. Your sister is upset. And frankly, I'm disappointed in you. This isn't how we raised you to handle problems. You don't just abandon your family and post about it on the internet. Call me back. We need to discuss how you're going to make this right. Make this right. As if I were the one who had done something wrong. As if my only path forward was to apologize and beg for forgiveness and return to my designated role as the family disappointment. I set my phone down and walked to my window. Denver stretched out before me, familiar and ordinary after the paradise I had left behind. But I did not feel ordinary. I felt something new, something I had been building toward for years without realizing it. I felt ready. I picked up my phone and typed a message to my mother. I chose my words carefully, knowing they would be analyzed and criticized, and probably shared with the rest of the family. I'm not going to apologize for taking a vacation with people who actually wanted to spend time with me. I'm not going to apologize for being happy or for showing that happiness on social media. For years, I've been told there's no room for me, not in rental houses, not in family celebrations, not in your priorities. So I did what you always taught me to do. I found people who make room for me. That's not throwing away my family. That's finally understanding my place in it. If you want to talk about that, really talk about it without accusations or guilt trips. I'm willing. But I won't be apologizing for choosing myself for once. I sent the message and waited. The response came faster than I expected, and it was exactly what I had anticipated. You're being ridiculous and selfish. I don't know where this is coming from, but it's hurtful and unfair. We always included you when we could. It's not our fault you take everything so personally. I could have engaged. I could have pointed out specific instances, dates and times and receipts proving my exclusion. I could have defended myself against her accusations and tried, again, to make her understand. Instead, I typed 3 words. I deserve better. Then I blocked her number. I blocked my father next. And Vivian. And Brian for good measure, though he had never contacted me directly. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly disconnected from my biological family. No more messages, no more excuses, no more waiting for an apology that would never come. I sat in that silence for a long time, expecting to feel sad or guilty or afraid. But what I actually felt was something closer to relief. The constant background noise of family dysfunction had finally stopped, and in its absence, I could hear myself think. My phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. "How are you doing?" I smiled and typed back, "Better than I've ever been." The weeks that followed were an adjustment. I had built my entire identity around being the accommodating daughter, the flexible sister, the family member who never complained and always made do with whatever space was left over. Learning to live without that role was disorienting at first. But gradually, I found my footing. I filled the time I used to spend appeasing my family with things that actually made me happy. I joined a hiking group and started exploring the mountains around Denver. I took a cooking class and learned to make dishes that would have horrified my mother's bland Midwestern palate. I spent more time with Danielle and Cole and Rosie, who were always genuinely happy to see me. And I kept posting on social media. Not to spite my family, but because I had finally stopped curating my life for their approval. I posted about my hiking adventures, my cooking experiments, my quiet evenings reading on my apartment balcony. I posted about the joy of chosen family and the freedom of letting go. 3 months after Bora, I received an email from an address I did not recognize. The subject line made me pause. From your cousin Ellie. Ellie was my mother's niece, someone I had seen occasionally at family reunions but never known well. She was a few years older than me and lived somewhere on the East Coast. I've been following your social media, she wrote. I wanted to reach out because I think you should know that you're not alone. My mom, your Aunt Dorothy, was treated the same way by the family. They excluded her for years, made her feel like she didn't belong. When she finally stopped accepting it, they cut her off completely. She died 3 years ago, and most of the family didn't come to the funeral. I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to let you know that the problem isn't you. It's them. They choose a golden child and sacrifice everyone else on that altar. I'm sorry you had to learn this the hard way, but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Not everyone does. I read the email several times, tears streaming down my face. Aunt Dorothy. I barely remembered her, just a vague impression of a kind woman who always seemed to exist on the periphery of family gatherings. Now I understood why. The pattern was bigger than me. It had existed before I was born, and would probably continue long after I was gone. My family was not broken because of anything I had done or failed to do. They were broken because they had learned, generation after generation, to sacrifice some members for the comfort of others. I could not fix that. I could not make them see. All I could do was break the cycle for myself. I wrote back to Ellie, thanking her for reaching out, and we arranged to have a video call the following week. That call led to others, and slowly, I began building a relationship with a family member who actually understood what I had experienced. Meanwhile, the silence from my immediate family continued. I had expected them to escalate, to show up at my apartment or contact my workplace or find some other way to force a confrontation, but they did none of those things. In their world, I had simply ceased to exist. It should have hurt. Part of me believed it should devastate me to be so completely erased from my own family. But the truth was, I had been erased long before the official block. My absence from their lives had started years ago, happening so gradually that I had not noticed until there was almost nothing left. Now, at least, the erasure was on my terms. As summer turned to fall, I received word through Ellie that my mother had been telling people I was mentally unstable, that my actions in Bora and afterward were evidence of a breakdown, not a breakthrough, that they were deeply concerned about me, but I refused to accept their help. They're rewriting history, Ellie observed during one of our calls. They do this every time someone leaves. They can't accept that the problem might be with them, so they make the leaver the villain. Does it ever get better? I asked. Does it ever stop hurting? The hurt changes, she said thoughtfully. It becomes more like grief for something that never existed. You mourn the family you deserved but never had, and eventually, you stop mourning and start appreciating what you do have. I thought about Danielle and Cole and Rosie. I thought about my hiking friends and my cooking class and my quiet evenings on the balcony. I thought about my job, where I was valued and respected and given opportunities to grow. I had so much, more than enough to build a beautiful life, and that was exactly what I intended to do. The final chapter of this story came unexpectedly. Almost a year after Bora, I was at work when I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Is this Georgia? A woman's voice, professional and slightly nervous. Yes, who's calling? My name is Whitney. I'm Brian's sister, your brother-in-law's sister. I sat up straighter in my chair. Okay. How did you get my number? I looked you up. I know that's weird, and I'm sorry for contacting you out of the blue, but I needed to tell you something, and I thought you deserved to hear it directly. I'm listening. Whitney took a deep breath. Brian and Vivian are getting divorced. The papers were filed last week. I was so surprised that I did not immediately respond. They've been having problems for a while, Whitney continued. Brian finally admitted that Vivian has been emotionally abusive to him and the kids for years. She controls everything, criticizes everything, makes everyone walk on eggshells. Sound familiar? I thought about my mother's text messages. You've always been difficult. I thought about Vivian's dismissals. Some of us can't just jet off to Bora Bora whenever we feel like it. It sounds very familiar, I said quietly. Brian showed me your social media posts, the ones from your trip. He said they made him realize something, that it was possible to just walk away, to stop trying to fit into a family that would never accept you. He's been thinking about leaving Vivian for years, but he was always too scared. Your posts gave him courage. I felt tears building behind my eyes. I had no idea. I know you're estranged from your family. I know you probably have no interest in being involved in their drama. But I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. You inspired someone to save himself and his children from a toxic situation. That's not nothing. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, processing what I had learned. My family had tried to make me invisible. They had excluded me, diminished me, and eventually pretended I did not exist. They had told everyone who would listen that I was unstable, selfish, ungrateful. But in the end, my visibility had mattered. My choice to stop hiding, to stop accepting crumbs, to stop pretending I was okay with being an afterthought, had rippled outward in ways I never anticipated. I had not just saved myself. I had shown someone else that saving themselves was possible. That evening, I video called Danielle and told her everything. How do you feel? She asked when I finished. I feel like the story isn't over, but also like my part in it might be. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. Rosie appeared in the frame, demanding to say hi to Auntie Georgia. She showed me a drawing she had made of our Bora Bora villa, complete with fish swimming beneath the floor and stick figures that she identified as all of us. When are we going back to the fish house? She asked. Soon, I promised. We'll definitely go back soon. After the call ended, I walked to my window and looked out at the Denver skyline. A year ago, I had stood in this same spot, phone in my hands, wondering if I had the courage to post those photos from paradise. Now I knew the answer. I had found that courage. And in doing so, I had found myself. The months that followed Brian's divorce revealed the full extent of the family's dysfunction. Whitney kept me informed through occasional texts, and the picture that emerged was grimly satisfying. Vivian, stripped of her status as the perfect wife and mother, had become increasingly bitter and isolated. My mother, forced to acknowledge that her golden child's marriage had failed, reportedly suffered what she called a nervous breakdown and had to be hospitalized briefly for anxiety. My father, caught between loyalty to his wife and the undeniable evidence that something was deeply wrong with how they had raised their daughters, withdrew into himself and was barely speaking to anyone. The family trip stopped entirely. The coordinated social media posts dried up. The facade of perfect happiness they had maintained for so long crumbled, and there was no one left to blame but themselves. Brian got primary custody of Mackenzie and Tyler, who by all accounts were flourishing away from their mother's constant criticism. Vivian moved into a small apartment and began therapy, though Whitney reported that she seemed more focused on playing the victim than actually changing. And my parents grew old in the house where they had taught Vivian to be superior and me to be invisible, finally alone with the consequences of their choices. As for me, I built the life I had always deserved. I continued to grow in my career, eventually becoming vice president of my division. I traveled often, sometimes to luxurious destinations like Bora Bora, and sometimes to quiet places where I could simply exist without performance. Danielle and Cole remained my closest friends, my chosen family, and watching Rosie grow up reminded me constantly that love is not about blood, but about showing up. I never regretted the path I chose, not when people asked about my family, and I explained that we were estranged, not when the holidays came around, and I celebrated with people who actually wanted me there. Looking back on my revenge journey, I realized it was never really about revenge at all. It was about finally believing I deserved a seat at the table, and when that seat was denied, having the courage to build my own table instead.